All right, y'all. So the $1 million question for today is the Joe Budden podcast signed to Netflix? Let's talk about it. On the latest podcast, episode 887, the crew talks about the upcoming Netflix boxing match between Jake Paul and Anthony Joshua. And what the fans noticed that which was super interesting is that right on the corner there was the Netflix logo, which begged the question, is this segment, is this topic a paid advertisement? We see the logo, but Joe never directly says that the segment is a paid advertisement. So there's a lot of layers to this, and I kind of want to unpack it. So let's talk about it. Layer. Let's talk about it. Okay, number one, this is a very interesting situation. We obviously know about Netflix current acquisition of a bunch of the iHeartMedia podcasts. And obviously we know Joe being Mr. Independent, he's not for that. As a matter of fact, on this very podcast episode, he mentions that he knows people who are not happy about having to be on Netflix. So that's number one. We also at the same time see Joe talking about him doing big things in 2026, him putting on a masterclass / clinic on how to do podcast business in 2026. And he backs it up by this rollout that he's been on in December. We see him putting billboards up in Times Square. We see Joe hitting all these podcasts. We see Joe buying TV commercials and really pushing the brand forward, correct? Talking about some of the podcast appearances, a lot of fans also kind of try to put two and two together and say, hey, you were just recently on the Logan Paul podcast. Now you're promoting this fight with the Netflix ad. The cast member themselves had a little bit of fun with that, and they were like, hey, did you get pressed by Logan to do this? And the reason why it was so fun is because some of the takes were so outlandish. Like Joe's over here talking about Jake knocking out Anthony Joshua. Mark Lamont Hill's like, oh, I hate Jake Paul. And they're clearly trying to like build hype and sensationalism around this topic, but it just comes across as not organic, not natural, just didn't flow right, which kind of brings up the point that the Redditors and the online audience has been saying. It's like, hey, this doesn't seem genuine, which is a big credibility hit to the podcast, which is a podcast that has made its name on being real, authentic, a people, the voice of the people, may we say, I guess. And the question has been brought up now because of this, of like, hey, are the podcast topics going to be dictated by paid advertisements? Because if so, it's not going to come across as organic anymore. It's not going to come across as natural. And it's definitely going to impact the podcast credibility, which some might argue that it's unnecessary. Joe has built this incredible following who's willing to pay on Patreon, which has given him the freedom to not have to do this kind of stuff. But we know that Joe is the ultimate capitalist, so if he can get a bag, he's going to try and get a bag. But we also know that he values his freedom, so that's an interesting take. Yeah, so it's just brought up a lot of discussions about the podcast, its credibility, its future business dealings. Is it independent? Is it not independent? What does this mean going forward? So, me personally, I view this as more of testing the waters. Netflix is testing the waters with Joe Budden's podcast to see whether or not they are who they say they are. And Joe Budden is using this to sort of prove to this major tech company, like, hey, I'm him. I push the needle, which is deep on a lot of different levels. It comes from Netflix POV, it comes across like Netflix is looking for cultural relevancy. And certainly, if they can get the Joe Budden podcast on board, it would definitely open them up to an audience that they might not be 100% tapped into. And from the perspective of the Joe Budden podcast, if they can manage to make money from these major tech companies like a Netflix and still maintain their rights, like not having to commit to an exclusive deal, this would be completely game changing. Like, this is the opposite of what iHeartMedia just did, right? iHeartMedia was like, hey, we'll give you exclusivity, you give us money. What Joe is doing is he's saying, you give me money, and I keep my whatever you call it, like I keep my rights. I don't know what the proper term is, but you give me money without us having to go into an exclusive deal. And what does this mean is that now Joe, if this works out the way it's supposed to work out, now Joe can go get that Netflix bag, and Netflix would have to pay him every single time something that is worth promoting needs to go through the podcast, through the JBP. So this could be, they could pay Joe for when they want to promote different shows, sporting events, et cetera, et cetera. Joe can do that. Then he can also go to Hulu. He can go to Amazon Prime. He can go to Disney. And he can get bags from all the major tech companies without having to commit to an exclusive deal. Like, this is, if this is what I think it is, this is brilliant. This is absolutely brilliant. Like, and they would completely change the landscape in regards to how podcasters do business and make money. Because right now it's like the idea of making money through paid advertisements is not a new thing. It's been happening, but I think that what we're seeing is Joe Budden doing it at a higher level, which would kind of make sense considering, I don't know if you guys remember a couple of podcasts ago, he went on a rant talking about like there's separation between him and everybody else, where he talks about there's levels. Like not many podcasts can say they have billboard ads on Times Square. Not many podcasts can say that they've been mentioned in the greatest rap beef of all times. Not a lot of podcasts can say that they're running TV ads. Not a lot of podcasts can say that they got New York Times articles written about them. So he's saying a couple of podcasts ago, he created a lot of space between him and everybody else. And what we would be looking at if this was to work out is essentially paid advertisements, but on a much, much, much larger scale without having to commit to any exclusivity to any single company. It would just be exactly like what any other network on cable television does, right? Like they're able to like get their TV shows on with Comcast, with this and this and this other company, and kind of collect ad money from all over the place. Listen, it's gonna be a give and take. I think the fans are correct. This is if advertisements are gonna dictate the flow and the direction of the podcast, it could have negative consequences as far as the legitimacy or the credibility of the pod. But then again, Joe has this other Patreon thing where he's putting more content that is, I'm not subscribed to his Patreon, but from what I hear, it's pretty good. It's good enough to be making $20 million a year from. And he's getting into like the skit / like show thing with like the Mark and Ian show. So the Joe Budden podcast might be making a transition where Joe might be viewing the main free pod as like, hey, I'm gonna give you this free pod, but I need to insert. I'm gonna start inserting some paid advertisements in here, which honestly, like, I think the fans need to chill out. Like, Joe has been giving us free podcasts because of some, and I put it in quiz because some other fans have brought up, like, does anyone actually really believe that he hasn't been getting paid for topics this whole time? Which is a valid point. Like, a podcast this big, yes, of course they've probably been taking payola or at minimum getting paid to discuss certain topics. It's no way a podcast this big hasn't been getting paid. But now, like, them making it official with the labels and everything, I think at least for the main pod, they have the right to do that. They've been giving us this free content, and it's good free content for a very long time. I mean, Joe has just only recently started doing the Prize Picks ads. And I think if I was in Joe's position, I would, if this is the plan, is to just get ads from all the major tech companies, that would be brilliant. Like, because now you're not going to, like, oh, let me go to Procter and Gamble and get an ad. Like, no, like, he's not talking about getting an ad from Prize Pick or Prize. He's talking about getting ads from, like, the major tech companies. Pardon me. I just think that's brilliant. I think he deserves it. I think if you want that experience of, like, not having topics dictated by ads, then you're gonna have to subscribe to the Patreon, which I think is what he's trying to encourage people to do. So this might not be the most popular take or the most popular opinion. I think this is the right decision. I think it's a power move, a forward-thinking move that would be brilliant and would make him a powerful player in the media game if he's able to make these direct business moves directly with the tech companies and not have to go into any exclusivity with any singular company. I think that's brilliant, and I think if the fans want, and I think that he could use or leverage his Patreon and tell fans, hey, if you don't want any of this, like, paid advertisement stuff, subscribe to the Patreon. And we got various different tiers where you can get this heat, my real thoughts or whatever opinions on. Listen, what do I know? I could be completely wrong. I'm sure people are going to go out there and say that, oh, like, you're glazing Joe, or you're, you know, which I this video kind of came across as me glazing Joe, but let's see what happens. What do you all think? Is the Joe Budden podcast signed to Netflix? Let me know what y'all think. Peace.